Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic.
How do you guys feel about the Department of Education being dismantled by Trump? Remember when Russia invaded Georgia and you had people in this country legitimately thinking Putin was in Atlanta? Yeah. As someone who works in education and is in California, I am only 2% worried. California has already established that it will pick up the slack that the Department of Education releases. What about states like Mississippi, Arkansas, West Virginia? They are kinda fucked, and they voted for this. I don't know what else to say. What this changes is it allows states to spend education dollars without federal oversight. This feeds into the conservative right's plans to fund private schools with public dollars, etc. This doesn't save money, it just eliminates oversight, which is the whole point of many of the agencies Trump is dismantling. Don't forget that it is only ever send it back to the states, right up until some states continue to do good for its people, then they will come for the states that aren't falling in line. It is the same song and dance they did with abortion. They just want to roll us back, and are counting on the least intelligent among us to proudly cheer for it. Extremely worried. I work in special education and this is going to affect my students and my job more than anything. My students will lose things listed in their IEPs. If they need new equipment, they won't be able to get it. They are given free breakfast and lunches while they are at school, and these families rely on it. This seems to be the main argument people are forgetting. Special education programs have their share of issues, but this will completely leave those poor kids out to dry. A lot of people in the US genuinely don't give a shit about disabled children. From my experience, definitely concerned. The states already have a ton of control over things like curriculum. What they don't have is the funding for IEPs and 504s. That's federal funding, and I am incredibly concerned about the kids who this has the potential to impact. I agree that our public school system needs a rework, but I'm not sure if completely getting rid of the Department of Ed is a good starting point. I agree with you. What will happen to the dollars? Is this a situation where they will cut out the middleman, and the states will be given money to support the programs, or is it, thanks for playing, and the states have to figure out what programs they can afford to keep on their own dollars? If it is the latter, then this is really, really bad. We will continue to pay our federal taxes, and now, locally, they are going to have to make up the deficit. That means higher state and local taxes. And worse, each locality will choose what they will support, as it will no longer be federally mandated. My heart hurts, because I fear that a whole generation of kids that need a little extra support are going to be left behind. I mean, think about it. Their plan is to cut unnecessary spending by eliminating things our federal taxpayer dollars are spent on. The goal isn't to lower citizens' tax bill. If they did, then the Fed government is right back at square one, not saving anything. So they expect us to pay the same amount for less services, and the Fed government will pass the savings along in the way of tax breaks for Elon, etc. We will still pay full federal taxes, plus states will increase taxes to pay for the things that previously were covered by the feds. Is this a situation where they will cut out the middleman, and the states will be given money to support the programs? You and I both know that isn't going to happen. This would depend on what half of the voting public you are asking. But from a non-political perspective, the purpose of its inception was to provide opportunity and combat a lot of the things this presidency is rolling the calendar back on. Families will move states to provide an education and opportunities they feel are adequate for their children, and thus by proxy, roll the US back to the early 60s. That's our plan. We are fortunate enough to be able to move to a state that invests in education. Many families aren't able to do so. It's not a coincidence that most of the bottom-ranked states for education voted for Trump. And that's the design of the executive order. Those that can't are left behind. I don't think it's a coincidence the bottom-ranked states voted for Donald. That's the plan. Bamboozle and distract the less educated and most desperate, then bombard them with confusion and red herrings, all the while you make the truly dastardly changes while no one is paying attention, and when they do, it's too late. My kid will be fine. I live in a blue state and have the means to provide a good education for her. However, being a somewhat decent human being, I'm fucking furious on behalf of other kids. And it's easy to say, oh, the red states are just getting what they voted for, but this will hurt so many innocent kids and people in all states who did not vote for it and just happen to live where they live. I'm also pissed because he's going to do away with public loan forgiveness even for people who, like me, are only a few years away from forgiveness and may have taken lower paying jobs because of the promise of that forgiveness. Thank you, I hate this rhetoric. We live in a red state with no ability to move right now because this is where my partner's job is. Trust me, if we could make it happen we would, it just isn't feasible. I have voted Democrat in every election since I turned 18, 17 years ago. But fuck my family and our rights because of where we live, I guess. People who genuinely think this way are no better than Republicans. It's just another step in the collapse of this country. I firmly believe this administration wants us to fall. Yup, they are acting exactly as an administration compromised by a hostile foreign power would act. They do. It's what Russia has been dreaming about for decades. There is significant circumstantial evidence that this White House is compromised by one or more of our adversaries. The fact that the White House is repeating the Kremlin talking points and setting policy by them, and Russian media openly refers to Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. as their people inside, should be raising alarms with everybody. And Russia wants nothing more than for the US to drag itself down to their level. Not great, Bob. It's all just a grift to funnel taxpayer money to for-profit education. Same with other so-called entitlements that are about to be chopped. I feel sorry for all of the children in red states that are about to lose out big time. Good teachers are already leaving these areas in droves since pay matches the low test scores. If those kids could read, they'd be very upset. If their parents could, they would be too. Considering it was one of the stated objectives of Project 2025, I am not at all surprised. Those folks told me he would never do it though. I imagine they might be a little surprised. Nah, they'll just immediately pivot to, it's what we wanted all along. Quote, my libertarian coworker is already saying things like, what do you even remember from school anyway? It's not like you learned anything important. Quote, how many people who voted for him do you think actually read or even listened to what was proposed in Project 2025? They heard, cheap eggs, less taxes, own libs. And then they stopped listening. I doubt a lot of them even listened that far. They just knew their lives sucked, figured the incumbent was the one who was to blame, and voted for the other guy. We're about to find out how stupid the South really is. Lol. Without help from Big Daddy, those southern states are really gonna struggle teaching people rolling on the floor laughing. What are you talking about? They're gonna be full of educated people who believe Trump and Jesus killed all the dinosaurs before the flood with Smith & Wessons. And on the third day, God made the Remington bolt-action rifle so that man could hunt the dinosaurs. And the homosexuals. No, they're not. They're just going to have standards that are so low that the populace will be educated at a level that matches the 1700s. The rich will get good private education, and the poor will be too uneducated to vote for people who actually want to make things better for them. This has been the Republican strategy for decades: keep the populace from being educated enough to understand that the people they keep voting for are very intentionally screwing them over for fun and profit. It sounds like you're agreeing with me, lol. Worried for the loss of the protections it provides for my students who have moderate to severe intellectual disabilities and autism. Where's the money going? Are you familiar with the concept of kleptocracy? That's where the money will go. It's not trickle-down economics, it's Hoover up. I deeply do not care. He is kind of right about our school system being bad. Is this the way to make it better? No idea. Maybe ask Switzerland and Norway ECT what they are doing. DOE doesn't make curriculum or set academic standards. It gives money for special education, Title I, research, and manages student loans. The states are the ones that make the standards. It sounds like what you actually want is for the DOE to have a larger role in holding the states accountable for the performance of their students, the way that Norway and Switzerland manage things at the federal level. You know what Switzerland and Norway have that we don't? Local influence, because they're much smaller nations. I live in Alabama, known to have one of the historically worst education systems in the country. But you know what? We're improving. It's a hill to climb for sure. But do you know why we're getting better? Local policies and funding changes. It has very little to do with federal policy or oversight. We have leaders who have taken responsibility for our problems. The result is a 10% plus increase in graduation rates over the last 10 to 15 years, outside of COVID-related challenges. School scores are up, and we have many new state-created and funded programs that directly benefit students. Norwegian here. Our schools are complete shit, don't come to us for advice. I'm going to say something unpopular here, but as a red state that has had notable education improvements, like a 10% increase in graduation rates over the past 10 to 15 years, we have primarily attributed our improvement to our state policies and local state-funded grants. We had a slight dip after COVID, but the progress over 15 years is legit. I had a friend who studied this at a well-known non-partisan think tank. Local policy, economy, and family had far more impact on a child's education than federal policy. You have to want the improvement at the most local of levels for it to even matter. But the DOE's main purpose is managing federal funding. Like you said, education improvements come from good state policies. The DOE makes sure students with disabilities have access to this. How is cutting it any good? It's easier to put blame on a distant conspiracy than admit the problem, and solution lies with our own communities. He can't do it with an full fucking stop. He shouldn't be able to. But, when nobody stops you, you can do whatever you want. A general can't fire a gun purely with an order either, not directly, but if his army is loyal to him, you plan to hear that shot to ring out after the order is given. Your statement only works until it doesn't. The speed limit on the interstate is just a suggestion unless there's a cop with a radar gun. There are just nearly almost zero cops on this interstate anymore. We are one public, make me, to the federal judiciary away from a dictatorship. They're ignoring court orders but mostly in private right now. He can't do this via until either no one stops him, Congress or SCOTUS, or he says he doesn't care what SCOTUS has to say about it. Then he can do whatever the hell he wants, and there's a non-zero chance that includes staying in office in 2029. That would require Congress to try to enforce their power. Frankly, there's no mechanism other than impeachment, that stop the president from just ignoring judicial orders. We're starting to see them test this with deportation rulings. It won't be long before they just ignore things like the judicial ruling on USAID.